Good morning. This is the second video in the introduction. Last time I ended by saying this is about experience of a lifetime boiled down to something, which brings up the question, a couple of questions. Boiled down to what and for what reason? I'd like to take the for what reason first. One of the most valuable things that we have as people is our ability to sense, perceive, and choose. And we value that in our young people, the abilities of sensation, perception, and choice. Those are innate human values. And the purpose of this whole series is really to help the younger generations, or an attempt to boil things down that are of help to the younger generations and the coming generations in their ability to learn, to perceive, and choose in a way that's good for them and good for the overall culture and community. And now, so that's the purpose. Now, what is it boiling down to? This is boiling down to a weave of stories. There are two ways that we learn to perceive and choose, that we learn to manage our senses and have good perception and make good choices. Two ways. One is direct experience. When we're born as children, we act like people, not so different from all of the animals. We act like our own kind, and we do so with our senses operating. So as a child, we babble, we crawl, we walk, we learn to understand language, we understand to speak, we learn to speak. And so that's direct sensual experience. We'll come back to that term. Everyday sensual experience is the common tie that ties us all together, because we all go through that in our culture, in an environment that is together. That's the first way, is direct experience. But that's not really so different from the other animals. They do the same thing. They act like their own kind, and they learn through direct experience with their senses operating. We have something else. We have language and story. If you think of a tapestry, that's a weave of threads that presents some kind of scene that we internalize with our eyes. Well, we are raised in a fabric of story. There's story that's woven together by the people that come before us, long before us, in most of our story. And we consume that. You can make an analogy of story fabric or story weave. You can make an analogy between that and food. In both cases, our body takes it in, and there's some internal transformation that goes on that keeps us healthy and functioning as people. That's true of food in our bodies. It's also true of story fabric, in that we take story in and we transform it into perceptions. Now, here's one thing that you may find some discomfort in. I believe that all forms of story, which involves words and symbols, it's all synthetic. It's made by people. Just like the spider synthesizes threads, there may be an underlying power that we do not understand. There's likely to be, there is, I think, an underlying power or force or something that is beyond us to understand, that guides the use of that synthetic material that the spider makes. The spider makes a web. That's guided by something that's mysterious. But the thread is synthetic. And if there were no spiders, there would be no spider webs. In the same way, the harvest that we have from language and from story comes from our internalization of it. It's our perception and choices that harvest the story after we've internalized it. If there were no people, there would be no stories. That's my contention, and that's true also of mathematics and science, religious story. We're immersed in story as children, within family, community, schools, peers, teachers, preachers, we're in a huge fabric of story. And this series is boiling story down into something. In Louisiana, we have something called a roux, not just in Louisiana. And we use it in gumbo and other things as well, but a roux is some good stuff boiled down that brings out the flavor, brings to life other ingredients that may otherwise be bland or even distasteful. So this is boiling down to a StoryWeave roux. One of the things that I think we fail to understand is that for a given generation, and let's think of my generation, I'm 65 years old, the story fabric that I grew up in really came from two generations before, at least from our grandparents and from our parents. It was story fabric is handed down from generation to generation, but it evolves and it changes. And we sometimes are unaware that we're in a wave of story fabric right now that largely was shaped by world events between 1900 and the mid-1940s, the time of the preparation for and the execution of World War II. That was a time of great scientific discovery, and it was a time when world events strongly shaped the StoryWeave fabric of science directly and indirectly of religion. And so, I think what happens is that our story fabric must evolve. We sometimes are caught in a wave that was shaped by world events and that can have biases built in. Biases and, well, let's just say biases. Human judgment is not necessarily absolute, that comes from world events. And the contention here in this series is that has happened to us, that is happening to us. The stories the story fabric that we live in, that was shaped so strongly by those years in the first half of the past century, that story fabric contains biases that we can't see. It restricts our perceptions. There was a time when we were more stereo-real in our perceptions. We had a more stereophonic, that's not right, but a more stereo view of reality. When you look at it, we have 2 hands, 2 feet, 2 eyes, 2 nostrils, 2 ears, 2 brains. We have 2 of a lot of things. And we get depth and in our perception, we get orientation in our perception and our ability to do things. We get orientation from that stereo nature of the way we're built. And what the contention is here, for the coming generations, future generations, my feeling is that we, because of the wave that we're in from the early part of the past century, we are slipping into the possibility of becoming monoreal in our perception of the world around us and our place in it. Monoreal instead of stereo-real. Our brains we have 2 brains, and we have not always been so monoreal in our thinking, but we're becoming very monoreal in it. And I personally don't want that for my grandchildren and the future generations. I believe that for healthy abilities of sensation, perception, and choice, the younger generations need to be brought back, to given the chance to come back to a stereo-real perception of themselves and their place in the world. So that's what this series is, and some of these things, almost all of these things we touched in, we'll go into them deeper. It is, what we are doing is boiling the experience of a lifetime down into a StoryWeave roux that can add spice and bring to life some of the ingredients that have become for us maybe tough or hard for our systems to digest. That's one thing about consuming StoryWeave, it's just like food. Sometimes we just can't quite digest it. Sometimes we don't even want to touch it. That happens both in, extremely complex mathematics. People don't want to touch it, they can't digest it. It also happens in the story of religion. Stories of religion that use antiquated language or use language that has become distasteful to people. We can't digest that fabric anymore, but it doesn't change the importance of the perception those fabrics are built to bring to us. So what we need is a good roux. We need to bring those things back to life with new language that comes from boiling things down. Thank you.